so welcome everybody. So we don't have any posted questions, so it's all up to you and what you would like to know about and what you'd like to discuss with us and with each other. So if there's someone who's got a question right now they would like to ask, just go ahead and then we'll start. Welcome, Jeff. Unmute, Jeff.
There we go.
There we go.
Hello, everybody. Yes. A little quick question about standing separate-legged stretching pose. In the very beginning, I know the dialogue talks about it, grabbing your heels and then the feet. You can't grab the heels, but so many people can't grab the feet either. I've been telling people to put their hands behind their legs or on the floor in front of them. Just make sure they're having their knees locked so they're getting a full stretch in the whole back of the leg. Anything else to say about that? Feet a little closer together, maybe? These are for beginners who are really stiff, right? So where it's really not feasible that they're grabbing their feet yet.
Actually, I'm going to pass it to Matt because he's pretty good at teaching this one. But I do think that you said about stretching the backs of the legs. The emphasis is actually on stretching the spine.
Oh, okay.
Legs and arms are helping you, but it's a stretch of the spine, which is actually going to change how you approach it. But in terms of technique for beginners, I think, let's have Matt answer.
So I think, the first thing I would say is typically don't have people put their hands on the floor unless they can't balance or they're finding it impossible to straighten their legs to begin with.
Yes, okay.
Because the problem is that once you put your hands on the floor, you tend to stop doing everything else. And so kind of the postures kind of becomes a bit of a dead end at that point. There are ways to progress with your hands on the floor, but it's actually, for a beginner, it's a place where they can simply get stuck. Because what they're first, as they say in the dialogue, first the legs stretching, then the hips, then the lower spine, then the whole spine, eventually the whole spine stretching. So they first have to lock their knees. So as you rightly say, a really stiff person may not be able to reach their feet, their heels or the outsides of their feet at all. Even with their knees bent a little bit, they may not be able to do it, and certainly not be able to straighten their legs and still hold on to their feet or their heels or the outside of the feet. Yep. So having them hold on to the backs of the legs as close to the foot as possible for them today, whatever that looks like today, is a place to start, because even though they don't get the full leverage of being able to pull their body down towards their feet that they would have if they could grab their heels or the outside of their feet, they can start to bring their body in towards their legs and have a certain amount of leverage to be able to stretch, to lengthen the torso. Because essentially this is leverage to allow you, instead of having a collapsed spine, I know you're upside down, but effectively your spine is collapsed, you're learning to stretch the spine. Another thing that beginners, stiff beginners especially do, but it also can be highly flexible beginners, is tend to drop the chin towards the chest, or lift the chin towards the chest because they're upside down. And that rounds the spine. And so if you can get them to say chin away from the chest or chin forward,
just starting right at the beginning, that will help them. Too.
Again, if you look from the side, if I drop my chin down, my spine rounds, but the moment I lift my chin up, my spine, it's hard to see here, but the spine starts to straighten. Because Sarah said, the final objective of this is to have such a powerful foundation in your legs and your hips that you're able to stretch your spine.
And that's an action that you're starting at the very beginning.
Yes. And so for a stiff person who's, they're stiff, like you're waking up in the morning stiff, meaning the stiffness isn't like a lifetime of stiffness that's going to move millimeter by millimeter today, but a stiffness that's beginning today very stiff. And so for them, pulling on their calves a little bit will probably give them a couple of millimeters to be able to slide their hand down a little bit, and then pull a little bit more and slide down and pull a little bit more and slide down. And so for some people who seem to be like this far from grabbing their feet, can reclaim that distance in one set of the posture. And so they might in the second set be able to grab the outside of their feet, or at least be getting closer to it. So that's why it's really important that they're pulling, not just letting gravity drape them down off their hips, because it will help them progress. And it isn't a progression. It's really important in that posture that it's not, anytime we say stretching in this yoga, it's not stretching an elastic band. We're not trying to lengthen ligaments. We're not trying to unduly, mechanically elongate muscles. We're trying to learn how to lengthen using the muscles of the body. So we're not trying to overcome the body, we're trying to access the body. And so that's why it's really important that they're actively pulling there and not just sort of sitting there waiting for something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if I stand up straight, well, if you thought of yourself just as a pile of bones, like a mechanical pile of bones, standing up straight like this would be impossible, because how on earth did I manage to get taller? But I got taller because my body's an interconnection of bones and muscles. And when they work together and they contract, they can create length. And so it's the same process in the stretching. That's why the pulling is really important.
Chibi, are you raising your hand or? Yeah, no, okay. Michelle, I think you saw Bikram address this relatively
Yeah,
recently.
this is such a good one to discuss, too. I just, agreeing with, Matt and Sarah, what they're saying, but to add more information to it, Bikram says it is the most important backside stretch that you want to learn how to do.
Mm.
Right. So, I mean, think about that, right? It's the most important backside stretch you want to learn how to do, right? And yes, ultimately, right, it's getting your spine perpendicular, forehead on the floor in between your feet. So when we look at it big picture, a couple of things, by the time you're in that posture, and again, many classes, getting yourself to understand that you've got to come down from your lower spine. So one of the things I think that we can do right away in this posture to help ourselves and help students is make sure, right, that there's an understanding of coming down from the lower spine, right, and not sinking at the waist.
So tell them where the lower spine is, because it's not the lower back.
The lower spine, I have the lower spine is not. Let's see if I don't have a lot of space here. It's not coming down. Then all of a sudden you see a lot of the students, right? Their head falls and they kind of sink at the waist. And all of a sudden there's a gap between the body and the thighs quite a bit, as opposed to when you're coming down from the lower spine, right? You are coming down from, accessing, right, your hip joint so that you're coming down. And I think that we forget, right, in those last few seconds, right? And it says even to go slowly, maybe a millimeter, an inch, 2 inches more that you could have if you slowed it down and you really came down from your lower spine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Nod your head, say, yes, do you guys understand what I mean? So as teachers and as students, right, we need to make sure we practice that. And I can't emphasize enough too, like Matt said, you need to keep your chin forward. I mean, I can hear Emmy. Two things that Emmy Cleaves would say about this posture. In balancing stick, your chin, remember, everything is done in sequential order. So your chin is already forward in balancing stick. So your chin forward in separate leg stretching stays that way. You know what I mean? Balancing stick, your chin forward, look 4 feet in front of you. And the next posture, it stays forward. Stays forward, right? And we tend to, the moment, your body follows your eyes. So you start to sink, then that just like, I think she used to call it a banana spine, right? Like, you round, just like Matt was showing, right? But by doing those things in the beginning, having that idea is already going to give you greater success so that you can start to grab your heels from the outside.
Yeah.
And to your point, Sarah, I've seen many times, especially this last time it was illuminating to me, because Bikram literally wants you to touch your forehead on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
It's not figuratively.
Mm-hmm.
He literally wants you to get your forehead on the floor. So in one particular class, he went to great lengths with one particular person as far as putting their elbows on the floor and opening their legs more and more. Now, he's Bikram. I don't really, we're not doing that. But, even in this last clip that he put out the other day, he's like, you have to bend your elbows. How are you going to get your forehead on the floor in between your feet? So he really wants you to get your forehead on the floor. So there's this cue in the dialogue that we just talked about at the teacher meeting. Open your legs more and more. How many mores are there, Sarah, in there?
Open
4.
your legs more and more and more and more.
4.
Four.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't say it. I don't.
But-
Thank you
And
for
you have to
telling
do
me
it
that
holding-
because I don't say it 4 times. I need to
Yeah.
say it 4
And you
times.
have to do it holding the feet. So it's actually a relationship between the holding the feet the best you can where
Yeah.
you can. Or it might be, you know, someone really can't. They might be holding someone down the legs, but how you do then, which is very, very useful for many people, they slide their hands down by the same amount they open the feet. So if they open their feet a millimeter, they slide their hands down a millimeter, and they keep doing it. And it's actually can be more than 4 times. And they actually, for some people, they can get right to the holding their feet that way. But Bikram did it with you, yes?
He did.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I
Add, before you give that, can I just add 2 things about so the other thing that Emmy said to relate to what you just said, Sarah, is Emmy would say she has this thing where you would draw a line behind your calf muscles. So just get your hands to start to go down a little bit more, right? If you open your legs more and more, right? And remember the other thing, and I'll give it back to you, Matt, is we're not looking for, what did Bikram call it? Heroes or fools, right? You're looking for a millimeter at a time, right? So that is a big, most important backside stretch that you want to learn how to do. So yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, no, he did it training. My teacher training a long time ago. My head was probably 1.5 foot from 18 inches from the ground, or maybe 12 inches from the ground, and I was very stiff. And he basically told me 3 things repeatedly for about a minute, whilst everybody else watched me in the posture. He said, "Pull harder, roll forward, open your legs more." And he kept on repeating these 3 things until eventually my head touched the floor. And it did. And I was amazed because literally there was such a big distance between my head and the floor. However, I think we need to wind back a little bit, going back to the sort of scenario that Jeff was coming from a beginner not being able to grab their feet, to say that the really most fundamental thing in that posture is that you have to lock your knees. There is no progress in that posture without first straightening your legs, because without your legs being straight, you won't understand physiologically inside your body, you will not understand how to bend at the lower waist properly. You won't understand how to fold at the hips. You won't understand how to fully contract your quadriceps in a manner that allows for your hamstrings to fully relax. And so I think, and obviously if today you're struggling to lock your knees, then that's where you are today, and that's perfectly fine place to be, but the knees have to lock. And so, a very common thing associated with people who struggle to grab their feet is that they're also not locking their knees and also having their weight in their heels. And so there is a phenomena in the body when the body's leaning, if that's leaning forward, a lot of people who practice like this are leaning back, their hips are back. So if I dropped a line from the back of their hips, it would go way behind their heels because they're literally sticking their bum backwards. All the weight is in the heels. And at that point, you're putting stress on the hamstring. The hamstring is contracting. It's contracting to prevent you falling over backwards. And so the moment you bring your weight forward, it allows for your quadriceps to contract and your hamstrings to relax. Which aids in the process of folding down, which aids in the process of grabbing the feet. So they're all interconnected phenomena, and all of the instructions obviously there in the dialogue, not with the great long-winded explanations, but all of the meat of what to do and how to do it is buried in the dialogue. But we have to stick to it. We really have to be kind of, grab your feet. If you can't grab the outsides of your ankles. We don't say if you can't grab your side of your feet, grab your ankles, but that would be that would be an example of you doing your best to try to grab the outsides of your feet. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good question because it is a challenging one for students.
It's very, very challenging. Both locking the knees, even in that position, unlike single leg balancing postures like standing head to knee where you're trying to balance as well as lock the knee. Here you're
Yeah.
not struggling with balance because you're using 2 feet. And still, can be for many people a really, really tough thing to really push the knee all the way back gently and and then lock it. It's
Well,
a
rather than
massive.
understand pushing the knee back, but the contraction, right, is to lift the thighs up, right?
Yes.
Yes,
Push the
of
feet down
course.
to the
Yes,
side.
Yeah, yeah.
yes,
So
yes. I mean, I think,
rolling,
yes, exactly. The pushing the knee back is a
You
very
only need
basic
once the
instruction for
leg is
somebody
straight.
who's not trying to straighten the leg. I mean, who's at the very beginning of that process. But in that posture, you're far more if impactive if you try to push your heels into the floor and stretch your hips up in the air. That action will engage your quadriceps and lock the knee like nobody's business. So we teach a whole workshop. One of our quarterly workshops is dedicated to legs and goes very much into this territory to allow you to unlock that feature, because when you understand how to use your legs, you have access to your hips, and then you therefore can then access your
your
spine.
spine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all that equal and opposite force, right? That, you're trying to use, right? There's no magic to this. Nobody, there isn't, one human having something more. It is access to, these tools that we have and use them the best that you can where your body is right now, right?
And it's not linear. So that's a really important thing. It isn't linear. It is literally getting breakthroughs in understanding how to use your body. It isn't like you're going to have to spend 20 years doing it, and each year you're going to make 5% progress until you've accumulated 100% progress. It's literally like you keep trying the right way, and one day you go, and then suddenly there's an opening and a few inches is apparent, because now you've gained access to a part of your body that you didn't realize you could utilize, and so on.
Yeah, and that's why the other
That
posture.
folding at the hips. I've heard stories of Indian teachers teaching that by taking a pointy object like a fork, so it's a fairly sharp, pointy object, and poking it into people's hip creases, and they fold very rapidly to avoid being pierced by the forks. Now, we would never do that in a class. It's a bit extreme, but it shows you that the body has intelligence. It just needs to be tapped into and awoken.
Just, I know you know this, Jeff, but something you said made me think it's worth saying, maybe for other people, because sometimes you come across this, that when we say the dialogue to people, we ask them, we say to do it, it's not prefaced by it's got to be perfect, otherwise we'll give you something else to do. It's that do this now and see what happens, and do it and come back tomorrow and do this again and see what happens. And it might not be perfect, but the act of trying to do it is going to create the development. So we have to change things in very extreme situations where the person would not make it. I mean, I really don't like myself, but some teachers do like to do that in very extreme situations, or otherwise the person just tries, and therefore you can just say do it. You don't have to say put the hands on the floor. You just say do it, and they try to do it, and then they get there, and then maybe they ask you a question they literally don't understand. You can deal with that afterwards. That's not really for you particularly. I know you know that, but just because I see sometimes that people want to feel that they're being asked to do perfectly, and then they want to do something else instead, but they're not being asked to do perfectly. They're being asked to try to do it.
Yeah, Sarah, if I can add, you're making me think about, you guys, too, the depth of this class, and we repeat it over and over again, because it's amazing how, we can't just do it 1 time, 3 times, 5 times, 6 months. It's awareness. It's body awareness, and it's repeating these things over and over again for, to have what Matt is saying, kind of your own light bulb go off, that it comes at its own timing. So, but remember, by the time you get into this posture, you've done other postures, but you've also come to a place in this posture because you've done all the other postures many, many times, accessing different parts of the body to get you where you are right now, that maybe today you can do something you weren't able to do. One of them being, which I find so fascinating and has been illuminating to me even in the last few years, is, Matt was talking about kind of the fork idea, right? Where you're really kind of, when you're, coming down from your lower spine. The more that you practice, oh my goodness, there's so many of them. I'll just say standing head to knee, even head to knee on the floor. The more that you access, right, the kicking of the leg, right? You pull your foot in towards your face, and then you bring your elbows down, suck your stomach in. The more you suck your stomach in and kick, you start to access that area too, where you can bring it in more. You know what I mean? You guys know what I'm saying? The more, because you need to pull, you need to, suck you need to access your abdominal muscles more and more. But that's not going to come with just one posture. That's a technique that happens throughout the class that you start to figure out, right? And you start to use, your body's resources to help you get that range of motion back, especially in that area of the spine, right? So, I find it so fascinating because the whole class is about more and more awareness.
Yeah.
And your access to, what you have in you. You improve the body, you improve the posture. Once you improve the posture, you improve the body, right? You can hear Bikram says those things. Well, how does he say it? Sorry. You can't improve the body until you improve the posture. You can't improve the posture until you improve the body.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
Something that also, but from what Michelle just said, something that I notice a lot teaching now is that if a student improves one posture, really improves it, like on that, they really have a breakthrough, that will sort of feed into the next postures that follow. It's very interesting. Even you don't have to tell them anything. They just learned how to use their body that a little bit different, a little bit more in line with how it's designed to be used, and that naturally, and also the intensity and concentration they use to improve it also translates to the next posture. It's very interesting to watch.
Yeah, it is, Sarah. That is fascinating.
I have a question about your grip with the standing head to knee. What is the difference between keeping your thumbs with all of your fingers or bringing your thumbs in front of on the top of your foot?
You want to do? Yeah.
So you can try it, like if you maybe hold a shoe or something in your hand and feel the difference between those two grips. That when your thumbs are on the top of your foot, you're basically grabbing your foot, you're squeezing your foot. There's a tendency to do that because we have a natural action that anytime our hands like that, we want to squeeze, we want to grab. Versus when our hands are like this, just a straight interlocked, it's just acting as a cradle. So you're not grabbing. And when you grab, it affects your shoulders and it affects the mobility in your neck. But when you just hold like a cradle, it's a very different relationship to the shoulders, because ultimately you're pulling on the foot to flex the foot so the toes come towards the head beyond perpendicular. But that's a process to trigger your body's understanding of how to lock the horizontal leg, how to lock the knee on the horizontal leg. But ultimately, when you've reached a depth of expression in that posture, there's no pressure in your hand left at all. You could let go, and your leg would stay there with your forehead on your knee. And of course, there is advanced versions of this posture where that's done deliberately. So again, whereas if you've kind of learned by grabbing, you're going to be stuck in that kind of mindset of grabbing. Having said that, it doesn't really matter for a beginner, because the beginner's got a lot of more basic things to be concerned with at that point rather than just the grip. However, it's good to get the beginner to start in a good
habit,
so they don't have to unlearn that habit later. Something where Bikram, way back when, in the 70s, early 70s, it was originally taught with the thumbs over the foot, way back when. And then by the mid 70s or a little bit later, he started to change it so that it was just a cradle, because, that way you're not grasping the foot, because you don't want that kind of action of grasping, because it stiffens up your spine, your neck, and your shoulders.
I've also heard him teach, he doesn't say it very much, but I've heard him teach, and it's something to play with, that you can actually, if you can't kick the heel out and flex the foot, you can use the thumbs
as leverage
against the toes, and pull the toes and kick against. It's actually quite a good technique to learn.
So I don't think it's one of the things where it's like the end of the world, but it's a better practice to follow the dialogue and have the good cradle intellect. But certainly, if I was teaching beginners, that I would probably focus in the list of corrections I'd give them. That would probably be low down on the list of things I'd be personally looking for to correct. There'll be more basic things like, are they locking the knee? Is it bending? Are they flexing the foot? Is their stomach sucked in? That kind of thing.
Michelle?
Yeah, I agree. I think it has a lot to do with the shoulder blade scapula, but again, you're making me think of Emmy. I mean, she used to be really adamant about making sure that you had the right grip so that you had the straight wrist,
Yeah.
right? You know, she's, you know, having, you know, a grip where the thumb's on top, you've got kind of funky wrists where, you know, your wrist should be straight. Bring your elbows down, right? Too, and it's a more the flexed foot too. Right. So I think about that a lot in my own practice. I think about
Oh, yeah.
I
Yes.
think about it a lot in bow pose too, where, you know, wrist straight, you know, wrist straight, right? You know,
Which, if you're talking at that sort of level, it does come a lot.
Yeah.
It probably comes from the scapula, doesn't it? How well you can use the scapula to influence the wrist,
Yeah.
and then the
Yeah.
grip changes. So it's
Right.
kind of interesting.
Right.
Yeah, there's all different.
Right.
It's interesting. We're talking about breakthroughs. Have you thought about, like, as you go through your practice, however long each of you have practiced, the different breakthroughs you have at different levels, and they're all different. You know, as you go through the practice, different years. You learn one thing and that builds to learning another. It's really quite fascinating, and the breakthroughs and the parts of the body that you become aware of. It's a continuous realization, which is very much similar to what you were saying about the beginner suddenly becoming aware how to use their hip crease, their hips muscles. We're still having those, but they might be smaller muscles, or it's it's ongoing.
Right.
Steffi, is this a correction that you've been given yourself, or one you just noticed in other people's practices?
Myself.
Yeah, yeah. So next time I would invite you is to try it both ways. Try it both ways and see if you can feel the difference in your arms and your shoulders and your neck, and feel it. Does one feel more fluid and more open than the other?
Okay.
Most changes to the grips that I see. So again, like Matt, if I'm teaching beginners, I'm happy they picked up their foot, however they hold it. It's like, so that's good, but it's like, you know, and then you can correct it afterwards when they're more stable. But most changes to the grips appear to me they're very intentional, and even if the change is small, it restricts the range of motion you have to do the posture correctly. So whatever it is, for example, standing bow, and you hold with the thumb wrapped around the foot at the toes, the shoulder blade instantly closes down. So then you think you can't kick, but you could if you got the grip correctly. They're all just those little changes interfere with the person's ability to do, even though it's apparently easier to do that way, or more comfortable, or more natural to that person. It actually gets in your way.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think it's fascinating with Bikram Yoga. He uses a lot of, the grips, the arms and the legs, his limbs to change the areas around the spine. Right? It's exactly what you're saying. That's why I think he's adamant about, the grips, half moon, hands, palms together, working the neck and shoulders. Right? How he has mama give you money, making sure you grab it the right way. Your shoulder goes back, right? Your arm going in front. So one shoulder, a little bit more of the head, so you can get that stretch in your shoulders in one line, right? All those little things, have an effect on the range of motion that you're trying to return. And you're right, Sarah, the body will find a compromise in the wrong way if you're not listening.
Yeah.
Right?
It isn't actually, it's really the definition of a comfort zone, because ultimately it becomes something which is a blockage. It doesn't help you. It's just, but struggling a bit in the beginning means that you end, going further and ultimately being more comfortable.
What do you say? The right way, hard way?
It's the hard way, yes.
Hard way. And I always add the hard way, eventually the easy way.
The easy way. Yes, yeah. The easy way becomes harder and harder and harder. Yeah.
Right, but that's why, it takes so much surrender in there. You gotta give up, that part of yourself that, that's why it's just you in the mirror, right? That battle that you're having with yourself. It's fascinating.
If you've been practicing a while, Steffi, and I'm guessing just the way you asked the question, you have been practicing for a while.
Yes, I have.
So one thing that you could try in Cobra is, when your palms are flat on the floor and all 5 fingers are together, try and put a little bit more weight on the inside versus the outside of your hands, and start to notice how it projects into your shoulders and your neck. Because that's a very particular posture where you can start to really notice that there's quite a significant relationship between each finger and specific parts of the shoulder blade's range of motion. Which, as a beginner, it's all a blur, which understandably, but over time it becomes clearer.
Yeah.
And the same phenomena on the feet, with the feet and different parts of the hip. So again, if you're doing standing head to knee, that foot flat on the floor, weight evenly distributed, seems like such a trivial instruction, but there's a lot of subtlety to be explored in trying to do exactly that more thoroughly.
Yeah.
Cool.
How long have you been practicing, Steffi?
Around 12 years.
Oh,
Nice,
cool.
nice. Congratulations.
Okay.
Anything else? Anything? What's tickling your brains and your muscles?
Yep.
Michael.
I've got a question, and this is kind of harebrained, and I'm asking, to be coached a little bit, but it's an interesting thing that's been just captivating me lately, and I don't know if it's the right thing or not, but anyway, clearly there's anatomical things that need to be addressed. That's the apparatus you're using in all of this, but this random curiosity of mine is like, how much of the precision is arbitrary just for the sake of getting people to focus and getting like the body-mind stillness thing going on? I guess that's kind of
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's interesting.
You'll notice that if you practice other kinds of yoga, in some of those there's a lot more emphasis on the detailed description of body parts and how to use them. Iyengar yoga would be an example. When I practiced Iyengar yoga for a while, the first thing that struck me was, as they described in great detail how to use body parts anatomically, how much of that was addressed by Bikram by using very simple words. So some of it, I do think, is to put the body anatomically in the correct position, to do the posture productively, to get benefits beyond just how good the posture is, how well the body works. I also think you make a valid point that that focusing to that degree turns off the brain randomly thinking, because you can't do both at once and struggling physically at the same time. And as a result of that, you do get a meditative experience, because that is the meditative technique. So I think you raise a really interesting question. That would be my perspective, and then I'm going to open it. Michelle first, and then Matt.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. I'm pondering your question. I do think that precision is important, and I know that there are, like Sarah, what you're saying, I think that it's important that you don't go ad nauseum about it, because then I think you're losing, instead of gaining focus, you're losing focus, or you're moving on to a different realm rather than the realm of getting rid of the monkey mind. You know what I mean? I think that the thing, right? Oh, I just froze. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
yes,
can hear you.
yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Cutting out a little.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I know all of a sudden you guys all froze. I'm like, wow, what happened? But if we get just like on anything, what's the term? And again, I'm actually thinking as out loud to you, Michael. But there is that term, analysis is paralysis, right? You know, and I do think you have to be accurate. You know, you need to be correct, but you can't overdo it. Otherwise, I think you do get in a paralyzed mode. You won't move on. You stay stuck. But at the same time, too, there is a purpose for it, but there has to be simple commands to it so that you're not drowning in the logical part of your brain, you know, which we're trying to put on the shelf in the back for 90 minutes so that you can pick it back up again when you leave class and have a fresher perspective, you know. But at the same time, you're right. It's precision, consistency, precision, and intensity. And I, because, obviously I value Bikram Yoga so much, I think it's the right amount of dosage in the dialogue that allows the precision to be there. And I think with that constantly in our classes, we're having these aha moments where we're like, wow, I never heard that before. Or, you drill in a little bit more precision, but you're not drowning in it, right? I mean, can you imagine if Bikram Yoga was like going to calculus every single day? Oh my God, shoot me, right? So you know what I mean? It is a really good question. I think
Sacred calculus. We could start workshops. Sorry.
yeah. Sorry if you love calculus. I didn't mean to offend anybody if you did. But I dance, and I used to take from a dance teacher, and it was all drills, all drills. No, there was just all drills, and you weren't really getting anything. Now you have to have the drills. You know what I mean? So I get it, and I think it's an interesting fine line, a mix of both. I'm curious why you asked that question.
And I'm fairly new to this
Sure.
this side of things. I've probably been practicing since like this form since 2019 or so. And and I think, trying not to be in a place of thinking of absolutes, it's this or that, there's a confluence of a lot of things. And that's fine. I think it's just a complex thing. But like, I always feel worried that I get to a place where I'm focusing just only on the performance of a posture or something, and I feel like it can be reductive from the body mind stilling kind of thing of it.
So I mean, Michael, what I would say is that there's in Bikram Yoga, the precision, the precise statements that we say in the dialogue, like leg parallel to the floor, not higher or lower, for example. That's a precision statement, is intended to give you the target to aim your arrow at. It's not meant to describe what you have to achieve, because on any given day, you may or may not hit the target. So it's about the directionality of your attempts, what you're trying to do, and that needs a precise target so that you're very clear, I'm trying to go forward. And not just forward in general, because there's 180 degrees of forward, that's kind of vague, but straight forward. Try to touch the mirror. It's not about touching the mirror. If you're in the back row, you're never going to touch the mirror. But trying to touch the mirror is a precise instruction, and precise actions can take place to follow that. And in the precision, the one-pointedness of your concentration, the dristi, the single point of concentration, is where the meditation takes place. And the clarity of your brain, where your brain is not worrying about the corner cases. When he said forward, did he mean forward to the left, forward to the right, forward up, forward down? He said straight forward. Okay, that's, and it's not being analyzed, because your brain doesn't have to analyze. Straightforward is that 1 degree down or 1 degree up. It's sufficiently clear to the simple brain, the reptilian brain, if you like, that says, I know what straightforward is. I can just launch myself forward, and I know what straightforward is. And so I don't need to think about the instruction. It is precise enough that I don't need to think, and in the thinking I can act, and in the acting I can develop and grow and meditate. And so it's that kind of precision, as opposed to so for instance, we say toes 2 feet in one line. Again, it's not about the precision of that. If you got if you had a teacher who got out a tape measure and started to pick holes that one toe was half an inch behind and the other toe, I would say to that teacher, you're missing the point. Because that instruction is not about precision of alignment. And it's interesting that, like BYSJ Iyengar, very, very famous yoga teacher, and a whole lineage, and many, many thousands of teachers out there teaching people all around the world. He used to be very, very famous for making a very, very big deal about alignment. But he was also relatively famous amongst his senior teachers for going on lengthy rants back in Pune at his senior teachers for getting completely wrapped around the axle about alignment. And he said, I never meant that. I never meant that your left shoulder and your right shoulder had to be within 1 millimeter of each other. I meant that you should compare the two to gain an awareness of how your body is working and how aligned are you to the greater spirit of your existence. And so, yeah, even at that level, it matters. So, yeah, I would say precision matters, but it's not precision of outcome. It's precision of intention. Because every single person in that room, what they're capable of manifesting on that given day is going to be completely variable from one moment to the next, but they can all share a precise intention in their action. Does that help?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a very good question.
Yeah, it is a really good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to add one other slight digression to that,
Yeah.
but it's a really interesting one. We had a gentleman in the room for many months who had a bullet go through the side of his head, and it had taken out part of his motor function. So he became paralyzed, arms and legs completely paralyzed in a wheelchair. And he was, by the time he got to us, he could kind of wiggle his toes. And he could use his arms. He was gradually reclaiming his nervous system as his brain healed. He could share that single-pointed concentration with a ferocity which was incredible for a man in his physical condition. And literally, I'm not kidding, week by week, we saw generative changes in his nervous system, expansion of his range of motion, expansion of his ability to move his feet, his legs, his arms. Eventually he was able to stand up for 20, 30 seconds and do a bunch of pranayama breaths, standing up on his own unsupported. Quite remarkable. But it begins with that single pointedness, that deep focus on the direction to go in and the actions to take, not on the outcome. And that's why I think Bikram Yoga is so phenomenally accessible to anybody, because there's nobody for which that can't be true. It's only true that today they may not get the outcomes of the person standing next to them. That person might be more athletic or have a greater range of motion in some part of their body, or find it easier to concentrate or something.
In terms of
oh, go ahead. I was just saying,
very short, in terms of the what you mentioned about performance and whether to get preoccupied by that, in a sense you might think if you do have the ability to go, to do the postures with skill, still the performance is a byproduct of the actions you're taking, and it's a delicious byproduct, and it's a satisfying one, but it's a byproduct of the actions. And in that space you can really keep your meditation and explore the postures.
That's helpful.
Good.
Yeah, there's a phrase in the dialogue too, right, that is so powerful, and I think sometimes we overlook it, where it's and standing head to knee, right? Just try, never give up, try 100% the right way, and that because the journey is the ultimate destination, right? Right. It's not, we tend in our culture, right, and talk about performance, right, the absolutes that you were talking about. We tend to, it's why Bikram Yoga is so fascinating too, because it's kind of counterculture a little bit in the best way. The most important thing in your life is your life. And I think culture has us have our lives in these destinations, when the truth is right, your life really is a bunch of Tuesday mornings, right? Like what your journey, right? And so, talk about how we're even trying to do how we're doing the posture has more value. Right? Has a lot more value, because it will translate into how you live your life. I mean, it has for me. I mean, I've never been really a bad person, but I'm a much better person than I was even 5 years ago, right? Right, Matt and Sarah, right?
Yes, you're dreadful. And as
yeah, you guys are all staring at me. I'm like, can you tell me I am? No, I'm just kidding. But I know, you know what I mean? It is fascinating too, right? Like, but that's hard. It's hard, because it's, you almost want to put it on a destination, tell me I strive there and I did it. Oh my God. I don't know about you guys, but it was depressing when you finally get the carrot and it's like, well, there's nothing here.
Yes. Yeah. That's
right?
interesting. Yes.
It's all smoke and mirrors,
like,
right?
yeah.
I missed my whole life. Well, that sucks.
Yeah.
right? It's the journey, not the destination. So that's why we practice as teachers too, right? It's, we're trying to, how are we teaching it to, like, how?
It also underpins
Anyway,
why Bikram Yoga has 26 postures when there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Hatha Yoga postures that we could be teaching. And why is it the same 26 every single time? Because it's not about the performance of the asana. And in the West we tend to get sucked into the glamorizing of an athletic yogi that can do some very advanced postures and be very impressed with it. And of course, there's nothing wrong with celebrating the athleticness of being. There's one, that's why we like sports and athletes and gymnasts and so on. But it's not those more advanced yoga postures were not created to provide a deeper journey for yoga. They were created to keep athletic people occupied so they could do their yoga.
Interesting. Yes.
So if you have a very, very flexible and very athletic and strong person, they may get bored doing simple postures and may no longer be concentrating and doing their actual meditation. So then you give them something a little bit more challenging to do that gets them back into concentrating and taking it a step at a time. And so, yeah, it's so in a way, the whole Bikram structure of sticking to the 26 and 2 is like, there's a lifetime's worth of exploration that's available there without having to get lost in, in 100 more postures. Quite aside from that, I personally like to do headstands, I like to do shoulder stands, I like to do other postures too, but but more for other reasons than my main meditation practice, which is Bikram Yoga.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I remember one.
Really good question.
Yeah, I know, you got me thinking. I remember Bikram saying, one time too, if you want to build your character, you need to just take one subject, and dive in it your whole life.
That's right.
And it will develop your character, right? And what was the other thing you would say all the time at teacher training? You guys are all jack of all trades.
Jack of all trade, master of none.
Right? So yeah. Thanks for
It
that.
actually, and it's a really interesting question that it goes back to what we were talking with Jeff about the science of like stretching posture and how, like, what if a person can't do it? What approach? Exactly the same approach. Because still, the performance, one of a better word, is the byproduct of their trying.
Yeah.
So they don't have to change it; they have to try to do it, and that's the place. And be in that place and try to do it.
Yeah.
If it's always the same approach for both.
Yeah.
For both. And it's actually what Michelle said about getting the carrot and realize, and so what? It's like the carrots are going to come rarely, and they're going to be really fleeting. So this is something I read with martial arts experts talking about how what we call the plateau, they call the work. And they learn that is where everything is happening, is in this dull plateau when you just keep working and it ceases to be dull.
That's right. And along with that too, remember the phrase, right, where you initially maybe as a, someone who's a little bit more not mature enough to see, right, boredom, you think it's boredom, but really over time you realize it's peace. You're just content.
Yes. Yes, boredom is very close to contentment. It's a good statement, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. Satisfaction.
Fascinating.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for that.
Thank you for fielding it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful reminder of the why. We have a lot of conversation about that in our staff and teachers. Laura, I've been talking about that too, like the why. Why are we doing this? Yoga is a means to an end. Well, why? What is all this doing? So it's great. Anyway, yeah.
All right. More questions or responses. If anyone has something they want to say in what we've discussed already, then please feel free to do so. Tibby, you got anything? No.
Another way to maybe look at the question that Michael had of the intention of the precision is to see how much of that precision supports some functionality that assists in the posture. So the thumbs above the feet, for instance, or under the feet, there is some function there. It's not a terribly critical one at that point. So you can judge it on that. I think precision in the feet personally is pretty important because it sets up the whole body's attitude in relation to the floor. Even if you're on your stomach, that
Yeah.
doesn't count then, but on your feet on the standing postures, that makes a lot of difference, I think. So there, I think functionality would be very strong, and so more precision might be needed.
I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of the precision in Bikram Yoga's instructions, like where to grip, how to grip, where to place your hands, like if you're doing Cobra, hands to not too far up and back and in and out, turned in or out, where to place the feet, weight distribution over feet, things like that, are all highly specific. That there is a physiological reason why they're there, that to help you engage your body in a very healthy way. Some of the unreachable precision, like try to touch the ceiling or try to touch the mirror, are directional intention. So it's not about achieving it, obviously, because you're not close to the mirror. But it's a precise goal, but it's not directly important to the body in that sense. But a lot of the small stuff is, even palms together, interlock your fingers, release your index fingers. All these things have an effect. That doesn't mean there aren't other ways it could be done. So that's the other, sort of caveat to what you were saying, Michael, is that there are other precise ways you could teach some of these postures that would be a little bit different from how they're taught here. And some of them might be physiologically and psychologically have this very, very similar outcome physiologically and mentally in the system. And some of them will have subtle differences physiologically. Like, if you turn your hands out in Cobra, which I've come across teachers doing it outside of the Bikram lineage, it has a very different impact on your spine, a very different impact on your neck, a very different impact on how you use your rib cage. And so that would be an example where they might precisely say turn your hands out to 45 degrees, but I would go in a Bikram class, I go, oh no, please don't do that, But it doesn't mean it's wrong. It would just be wrong to do it in a Bikram yoga class because the class has a particular format and the physiology of it is really important. Like I had a student yesterday, Ali, who has been practicing with us for a very, very long time. He's an ICU doctor, so he's very wise about the body. And a lovely man, and he had just recently gone to a studio some distance from us where they only was a 60-minute class, and so same instructions to do the posture, but at this point obviously the number of times you did it and the environment and the timing of it was different because it was squished into 60 minutes, and he came out saying, I had no idea, it's really different, isn't it? And so, so I think all of the precisions matter, but not like something's going to go horribly wrong if your toes aren't quite in one line. So I think I would invite you to kind of notice where your inquiry is taking you in each of them and say, is this precision because of the body movement? Because a lot of it is. Is it precision just to concentrate the mind and get rid of the, if you like what I took a class one time where somebody, I can't remember what it was, one of the postures, they gave me 3 different ways to do the posture as they're setting up, and I ended up not being able to do the posture at all because my brain was stuck in an analysis of which way shall I do it,
Right.
And I was like, I was stopped dead in my tracks.
Yeah.
Left, right, center, I don't know. So.
My mind, your body. You're reminding me too, another, going back to Michael, your thoughts on this question too, like, Bikram intentionally doesn't want the teacher to do the yoga, right? So he really wants in fact, he never did privates. He has a joke about that, how Madonna always wanted him to give her privates, and he wouldn't because, she's got to be like everybody else, get in the hot, sweaty room and, get your toes and heels on the line, right? Like, and then for you to, it's a self-discovery, right? It's a discovery, on your own, which is great. I mean, you can be in a room with so many people, but it's between you and you. No one needs to know what the discoveries you're having, right? It's kind of interesting. It's a very exposed class, but you have a private journey with it, right?
Very interesting you bring it
Yeah.
up. Something happened today, actually, because we were talking about how these instructions work together. She's a very adept student who, nevertheless, when she does triangle, her right leg is not locked. And I've been saying this to her over and over: lock your right leg, push the thigh back, push the foot down, all kinds of stuff. Today, though, I was telling another gentleman, stretch up, stretch the shoulder blade, the scapula up, touch the ceiling, stretch down, stretch. And she really did that. And I saw her lock her knee, lock her back, lock her right leg, because she had to facilitate the stretch.
Wow.
And I said to her, did you feel that? And she said, yes. It's like, so that was interesting, because we can give the words as a framework for it, and they're just enough. But that precision sometimes comes by the experience of trying to do it. And she got all of it. I didn't need, all those words I've been telling her didn't teach her, but trying to do another thing immediately taught her, and she got all the physiological sensations, and it'll be locked from this day forward.
Once you have it forever.
You have it ever. Yes.
What posture was that?
Yeah.
Triangle.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, is that I think it's so easy to underestimate Bikram yoga, because the dialogue instructions are simplistic. To some degree, there's simplistic instructions like try to touch the ceiling and try to touch the floor and so on. And they're given in very simple language, and they're not typically naming anatomical Latin names for different parts of the body and so on. It's very easy to think that it must be a little bit simplistic, but it actually is very profoundly aligned to how the body moves. And so the people who I think struggle the most with Bikram yoga are people who are somewhat athletic and quite well educated in physical movements, like they've done the gym stuff, they've done specific muscle group optimizations and stuff like that, because then they try to analyze the actions and break them down into pieces, and all the actions of an asana work together to cause something to happen. And so they don't really respond well to analyzing, like, if I say stretch up out of the waist and try to touch the ceiling in half moon, well, if you really try to do that for real, not just I'm holding my arms above my head, but if you really try to touch the ceiling, you will start to notice something's happening in your hips, something's happening in your thighs, your calves, your feet, your ankles, your toes, something's happening in your scapula, in the spine. A lot of different things are happening all over your body, but it's a very simple instruction kind of thing. But you're absolutely right. There's definitely some elements of precision where it's like leg parallel floor, like standing head to knee, leg parallel floor. There's not a physiological rationale where it has to be exactly parallel to the floor. That's an instruction to give you a specific target to aim for. The same with balancing stick. Balancing stick could be done like this, but that would be a bit weird. So when we say make it parallel to the floor, and there are differences in those positions, but realistically the physiological benefit of the posture could be done like that. So again, people who are really stiff, you see them doing it like this, and we're saying to them, leg up, body down, leg up, body down, leg up, body down. So yeah, I mean, hopefully if you take a fresh look at it, you'll start to see the patterns for yourself.
I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and come back to us. Come back to us with what you find and what you observe and what you see. Not just any questions you have, but what do you discover as you explore it?
Copy that.
I'm going to raise a subject, and if you get a question, just interrupt while we're doing it. So I'm going to raise a subject from the general. And
what are the winning numbers for the lottery?
That's a good question. Right?
You can say interrupt.
Yes. So
Lottery?
just one aspect which doesn't sound very precise at all, but is precise, is what body part are you supposed to be moving? I'm just going to make this introduction, then I'm going to ask Matt a question. So, and as I say, if you have a question, you just interrupt us, because I'm doing this just to, so we've got some subject matter. So it becomes apparent, especially when I'm teaching Locust, for example, that some people, the instruction is to get arms straight position underneath the body. Some people will try to make the wrist or the elbow do it. It becomes very uncomfortable and very awkward. So I'm introducing this by saying, what is an arm? An arm starts at the shoulder blade. It doesn't start halfway down. So Bikram is very precise. It's not it's a really obvious precision. It's a day-to-day precision. But a wrist is not an arm. An elbow is not an arm. An arm is an arm. So I'm saying that just about arms. What I'd like to talk about, and chip in if you're interested in it, or just change the subject, is legs. What is a leg, and how do you use it?
Well, go back to what is an arm. So, we in Locust we say, grab the floor with your fingertips. Your arm is meant to be straight underneath the body, and then we ask you to grab the floor with the fingers. So why are we doing that? We're asking you to do that because we're basically asking you to engage the entire structure of the arm, which includes the shoulder blade. And so now when you lock your elbow and you pour power into your arm, then your whole arm, including the shoulder blade, is one thing. You can imagine if you froze all those joints and you put super glue in all those joints, that would become one thing that would have a direct articulation, a direct relationship to your spine. It floats over 16 muscles connected to the rib cage and the spine, and can articulate the spine by pulling in one direction or another. So then if you take the view of the leg, you have the same sort of phenomena. There's a little bit different because you can see that effectively each side of the pelvis is like your shoulder blade, because pelvis is two halves, not one. It's not one thing; it's two things connected at the SI joint on the sacrum. And so, if you think of your hip, your pelvis, your left pelvis, and your left femur, and your left tibia and fibula, and the rest of your foot, and so on, that's one thing. So when you lock your knee, it's not just about your knee, it's about engaging all the muscles up and down the leg, including the trochanter into the hip, the pelvis, into the hip joint. And so then when you do that, now you've got one powerful structure that can articulate the lower end of the spine on one side of the spine, just like the arm can do it on one side of the upper spine. So now you've got 4 points. If you do both take your arms and your legs, you've got 4 points that can directly articulate the spine in very powerful ways. And obviously, depending on what postures you're doing, they can be working together. When you've got your 2 legs together, they're both doing the same thing. When you've got the legs in different positions, like triangle, one of the legs is doing one thing, one of the legs is doing the other, is doing something else. But it begins by starting to see them as an entire structure, that it isn't just the bit that it protrudes, but it's the bit that it connects to. So for the arm, it includes the shoulder blade. For the leg, it includes the hip joint. And that's one of the things that's missing in a lot of people who struggle to do a forward folding, bend from the lower spine. They don't have a good relationship to the hip joint. Same thing shows up in all the one-legged postures. But we get to practice it a lot in the floor series, especially the spine strengthening series, where we start to straighten the legs, but they're on the floor. And so just like with the arm, where, to have people learn how to lock the elbow, you have them extend the arm, whether it's awkward, where the arm stretches straight out in front of you, or half moon, where it stretches up, or various other postures where it stretches like that. The same phenomenon with the leg, that when you put the leg into extension, whether you're kicking the heel away from you, like Stephanie was asking about the grip in standing head to knee, or you're standing on the foot, which effectively means you're pushing the entire planet Earth away from you to be able to stand up against the gravity of Earth. You're putting the leg into extension. If you include the hip in that stretching, you have a lot of strength, you have a lot of stability.
Michelle, yes, it does. Michelle.
Well, you're making me think of Dhanurasana, floor ball.
Yeah.
Because this is one of those 2 teachers, right, where we need to make sure we say the dialogue the right way. Because it's exactly kind of what Matt is saying, that we need to use the legs. And if we don't say the posture the right way, there's no way they're using their legs. Right? So the first part is chin forward on the floor, right? You grab your feet a couple of inches below the toes, and then he's giving, right, the precision or the accuracy, making sure you hold on a couple of inches below the toes. Please don't lose the grip is even in that one, right? And then it says wrist straight, thumbs included, right? 6 inches between your knees and your feet, arms and legs are the wheels that are on the base, which is your spine. It's a lot of setup, right? In that, right, Sarah?
Yes,
Then,
a lot of that.
yeah. And then there's no looking up towards the ceiling yet. It's take a deep breath, gently, both legs kick up, look up. So the first action, right, to Matt's point, right, is to use the legs. Because if you look up in a lot of the other postures, it tells you to look up first. But if you look up too fast, you're rolling back.
Yeah.
And then you're fighting the posture, and you see a lot of people kind of just, they're not getting their thighs up off the floor.
Yes.
It's just their knees.
Yes. Yes, which is not, that's much, so
Right.
that once you understand it, even if you can't do physically it, you know where you're going. It's the legs, it's the leg.
Yeah.
And if you meant knees or half muscles, he would say that, you know, so.
Right.
Then this
Right.
journey comes, much like the students today, that as you understand what it is, you start to understand over time how to use it. It's
Right.
But I must
Exactly.
say, sometimes, you know, I had this experience. I have this little side project, which is going very slowly. I'd like to be able to do Locust posture all the way up, you know? It's like I get gradually better at Locust. And I'd done a bunch of things, and I said to Matt, all right, what next? And he said, oh, start kicking from the hips muscles. Stretch the leg back from the hips muscles in the Locust. It was game-changing.
Yeah.
And I took a class with a teacher who always says to me, oh, the hip's a little bit out of line. She was about to say that, and she said, oh, you're doing it. Oh, I didn't think about the hips. All I did
Right.
was just start at the fat part of the leg, for want of a better description.
Right, right.
And then go through to the toes, you know.
Funny. Yeah.
And it's a game changer.
Yeah.
And you can start to feel, if you're interested in that, you can start to feel the spine, because it's actually having an effect on the
Yeah.
spine.
It goes back to
Standing bow is the same way, right?
Same
So-
way, yes, yeah.
It goes back to
way.
what I said at the beginning about stretching. That
Yeah.
when you stretch your arms or your legs, if you feel like they're coming out of the socket, like if you kept doing it, you would dislocate the joint, then you're not doing it correctly. Because the more you do it, the stronger the connections of the joint should get, not weaker. And so you tend to notice it not in stiff people, because the inherent stiffness prevents them from doing that. But you see it in extremely flexible people. And bow pose is a good example, where you can see an extremely flexible person do a bow pose which might capture people's attention on Instagram. But when you look at it, you can look at somebody who's using their body in a very unhealthy way, because they're effectively just lifting their legs out of their sockets, and they're lifting their arms out of the shoulder joints. And because they've got lots of range of motion, it all looks glorious, but it's actually getting more and more unstable. Versus when you see a strong person who has range of motion doing bow pose, you see a very different and a very much more naturally healthy looking movement of the body, where you see that the arms are firmly rooted and the shoulder blades are doing a lot of work to communicate with the spine, and the hip joints are strong and are doing a lot of work to communicate with the lower end of the spine, and the spine is responding by moving and bending. But in the process of doing all of that, they're getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So their strength is increasing every second that they hold that posture.
Yes.
And not just the strength, but the longevity of their joints. It's one of the things where I think Bikram giving simple instructions is very helpful, because if you can get too surgical about, oh, you need to use your leg a little differently in bow, or you need to use your arm a little differently in bow, you'll start to think about it, and in the process of thinking about it, you'll override the common sense that's embedded in the body itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the starting point for anyone in their practice is which body part, it means the body part it says. The words mean the body part it says. Eagle posture. Cross your arms each other and twist like ropes, and see then the joints come in the right place. Then again, I see people not doing that and trying to make the elbows and the wrist bend, and it's just going to be uncomfortable. And, you know, but once you know, then you know which part to address, and the learning comes and your questions come. It's really, and you're stronger. I'm just thinking, I'm laughing because I'm looking at Michelle and she's going to say next time I say, strong right leg.
Exactly.
I think honestly,
Careful what we talk about in here, right? Come out on
but I think it's a humbling journey. As a teacher, I think it's a particularly humbling journey, but also as a practitioner, that sometimes I have beginners asking me questions about, what have I learned in the years of practicing and teaching, and in a way, what we're learning is nothing. It's really nothing, because we already knew it. We're not really learning anything at all. The body, you were born with the DNA to do this. The body has the wherewithal to do this, and it's just that we're discovering it for ourselves. So our neocortex might be learning something. It might be learning a greater comprehension of how the body works. But our body already knew that. The body already knew how to strongly use its hip joint and strongly use its shoulder joint. But as modern humans, because we are less physical, we tend not to have that ingrained in our habits of movement, or we've learned less healthy ways to move our body, either just because of the limited repetitive range of things we do, like driving, holding the shoulders, or keyboarding, or whatever, or we've gone to gyms and been taught by a very specialized trainer to lift the left inner spleen subcutaneous whatever muscle, and then we're overriding our common sense to do that, and then we've developed some bad habits of how to move our body.
Remember the point, though, right?
The really is trust the dialogue and trust the process.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
simple,
you're reminding me too, because the point is self-realization. That's the whole point,
Yes.
right? And then, Bikram will tell you in Hatha Yoga, right, we're using as a body, as a medium to renew the mind. But he will tell you, though, too, if you have a junk body and a screw loose mind, right, and a lost soul, I mean, especially a junk body, that's the only thing your mind is going to think about. I don't know about you guys, but if I have an injury, pardon me?
Good luck with the self-realization then. You've got no possibility for it.
Right, all you're thinking about is your don't feel good, right?
Yes.
That's no fun, right? Like, so yeah, you're making me think too of Standing Bow. The phrase in there, right, is it's charge your body forward towards the mirror, try to touch the mirror. Right? It's not charge your arm.
No.
Forward.
Your body, yes.
Charge your body. I mean, I know it's fascinating, isn't it? Right?
Yes.
You think about charge your body forward towards the mirror.
Absolutely.
Try to touch the mirror, right? I mean, me too, right? I'm telling you guys, right? You hear these words over and over again, and then you hear them, right? You hear them, and then you really hear them. But that's life. That's why it's to get you deeper into your life.
More questions. Has anyone been stimulated?
Yeah, I apologize. I had a list of questions in my head a few months back, right? And I just didn't. I'm gonna make sure next time I have a list myself too, because every time I take class, right, even as a teacher, I'm like, God, right? There's things you want to explore.
Jeff, you've asked us a teacher question. Have you got a student question? Since we're all both.
I was trying to think of student questions. I didn't come up with anything that I could say. I will say, I can pose maybe a scenario. I noticed with the 60-day challenge that it's kind of strange, but I noticed certain postures, especially the half locust pose, which is a real struggle typically, that I suddenly had this ability to lift my leg up much higher, keeping my knee locked, toes pointed, hip down, and other leg not helping, and it was like suddenly way too easy.
Too easy?
Yeah, it was very strange. I noticed that I had some issues for quite a long time getting the leg up. It was a struggle. I was, using as much strength as I could to lift each leg up and both legs and whatever. And I don't remember noticing the shift. I just remember noticing near the end of the 60-day that like what happened? What changed that my leg just goes up with just
Well, it
ease?
speaks to the intensity, doesn't it, and the frequency. So, you know, Emmy and Bikram have always talked about frequency, intensity, and precision. But also, as a result of you, if you're doing every day, did you? I mean, what it sounds to me is that you finally learn to lock your knee properly. You lock the leg because that makes it lighter.
Hmm.
So if it's locked, it will go up. And sometimes if you can practice a thing, it's quite interesting to learn it. If you just stretch back, as I was describing, even now from the hip muscles, the hip joint, the hips muscles, stretch it back on the floor, it starts to lift up by itself. It's a really interesting phenomenon. And then you can keep using that momentum and help it. So that would be my feeling, that you'd learn to lock your leg, but also just the fact you've done it every day without resistance, you know.
Yeah. When you start to do it more automatically, like just throwing yourself into it rather than trying to break it down into pieces to solve, it starts to work together. Locust is a really good one because, you know, Locust is really just an exercise in communication. You've got lots and lots of pieces between the tips of your fingers and the tips of your toes. And if they all work together and they talk to each other, you'll be able to lift your legs way up in the air.
Yeah.
But often we start the process somewhere down the chain so that only part of that chain actually activates. Like somebody who, in the more extreme example, somebody who just lifts their lower leg. You know, they use their calf muscles and they bend at the knee and they lift the lower leg. And obviously that's kind of obvious that you're only using a small piece of that chain. The next step is that you're using your lower and your upper leg, but you're not really using your hip. So then the leg comes up a little bit, but not so much. Then you add the hip into it. Now that whole leg is working together and it comes up a fair bit more. And then you start to add the lower spine into it because the hip and the spine are really working together. And then suddenly it's coming up more. And then, so, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, your hands are actually grabbing the floor. Your arms are fully engaged, become one solid unit. Now your shoulder blades are connected to your spine. So when you come to the both legs Locust, something happens when you try to lift both legs up, not just with the legs, but with the whole of the spine. So it's not unsurprising if you practice like a challenge, you know, every single day, that at some point you'll just become more naturally aligned to your body and see these potentially surprising outcomes.
Absolutely.
And the really beautiful thing about it, again, is like it goes back to what I said before, I think, is that it's all there. It's not like, you know, it's not a linear journey. There are these aha moments, whether they happen in our thinking mind or they happen physiologically, where suddenly like, holy crap, my leg came up like 6 inches more than it did yesterday. What the hell's going on? And it's kind of beautiful like that can happen. It shows us that we really don't know what's going on inside us.
Yeah. One thing that I think from the challenge, because I've had it in a different situation, in a very, very hot class. You know, we all have things we put in the way, yes. And I didn't like to do Locust unless I could really get it in. The setup was right and the muscles were right, and I was going to do a really good one. I wouldn't do it, and I realized it was such a hot class, and I'd been practicing every day and teaching, and it was such a hot class. I didn't have the energy to resist, so I just did the posture, and it was a really good one. And I think that happens in the challenge, maybe whatever it is that is one's own resistance, whether it's over intellectualizing, whether it's not wanting to look bad, whether it's like, I don't like the teacher, whatever it is, whether I can't do it. It's like you can get so tired that you just do it. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's, what do you think, Michelle?
I'm smiling because I wrote a few things down. I'm totally agreeing with you, especially because, Jeff, you said the word easy. And when I hear that too, it's like, it's because you dropped something.
Yes.
You dropped whatever was going on in you. I don't know. I mean, I think Matt is 100% right. I can hear Bikram now. He talks about Bikram Yoga being perfect coordination.
I couldn't hear that.
Perfect coordination.
Oh.
How your body works, how your mind works, right? And I think a lot of times too, what's in the way is we're in the way, right? And you repeating it over and over and over again, maybe at a point too, where, especially at Locust, when you've done so much in the standing series, quite honestly, it's funny that you say that, because I feel like I see a shift in the class right about that time. I feel like everybody's kind of either given in or to give up, and then they've decided and they're doing it and it's easier. You know, there's that in there, right? Letting go of the resistance. So that could play, you know, and I feel on the podium sometimes you can see it. You can see that now there's no more noise in the decision, you know, right? There's not stuff in the way that prevents you from doing that action. And maybe you do it better or maybe you're not, but it's easier. Like you said, I feel that word easy that you said tells me that you let go of
Yeah,
something.
that's the clue. And it's,
Yeah.
particularly Joyce had a wonderful phrase, which is body's not stiff, mind is stiff.
Yeah.
Mine
So
is, I feel it.
yeah, so that the stiffness comes. It's interesting. I know that's you have to ponder it if you have a very stiff body, how that happens. But that seems the same thing. You dropped something which was getting in the way physically. You dropped something else, and then you had the technique, and you just did it.
It'd be nice to know what that was so I could do it with other things.
Isn't that interesting?
Maybe
yes.
as opposed to
Subconsciously.
adding something, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but maybe as opposed to adding something, Jeff, it's the other way. I feel like for me right now, my DNA is hardwired to think in a certain way. And I think Bikram Yoga is trying to get you to kind of just, how would you think of this in a different way? So maybe it's not what you think you did do, but maybe it was a letting go. Maybe there's less there, Jeff, right? Or come at it from, I'm just telling you from just a different angle, right? That's the other thing is Bikram Yoga makes you break patterns. You're supposed to be breaking patterns, right? That we carry. Right?
Many students have the experience, they go on vacation and they come back and they find their practice to be less satisfying, they're more stiff, whatever. I had one this morning who said yesterday was his first class back after 3 weeks, and he surprised himself that he could do all the postures. And you actually had one, I think, who came to the front desk and said he'd had such a great class. He'd been away for such a long time, he'd forgotten which postures he couldn't do, so he just did them. So that's that space. It's like the mind has gone away a little bit.
That is so great. What an epiphany for him, though, right? Like,
but it's also, it's also the mind. When we say the mind is stiff, it's obviously there are many layers to the mind. There's the most obviously conscious layers, but there are more unconscious layers to the mind, and there are more primitive layers to the mind as well. Your physiology of your body has learned a certain way to use your body, and that's ingrained as a habit.
Yeah.
And so, the intensity, the precision and the intensity and the frequency with which you can practice are tools that you can use to combat that. Additional things you can do, it's very interesting watching stiff students in Paschimottanasana, the stretching posture we do when we do head to knee on the floor just before the spine twist. It's very interesting to watch people there and get stuck trying to do Paschimottanasana, grabbing their toes and straightening their legs. Can get stuck there for a decade, for a very long time, and then one day have this just stunning breakthrough that happens more or less instantaneously. And all of these asanas teach us something about ourselves, but it's a process to open yourself to that awareness. And I think one of the things that underpins it for me, my really big breakthrough I had in Paschimottanasana, and the realization came after the breakthrough, not before the breakthrough, but I share with you, is that I realized in that moment, as I suddenly was able to open up into that posture far more than I'd ever been able to do before, and it happened almost instantaneously, was that I simply realized that I had never been trying to do what I thought I was trying to do. So imagine you're in a prison, you're in Colditz in the Second World War. You're in a prison and you really don't want to be in that prison because you probably won't live very long if you stay in that prison. And all you have is a little spoon and there are sandstone walls. So you start scraping that spoon against the wall. Well, the Bikram Yoga equivalent of that would be I just kind of gently scrape the spoon across the wall with wishful thinking that eventually I might be able to create a tunnel and escape. But that's not what they did in the Second World War. They actually dug away at that wall until their fingers were bleeding, and they kept at it for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, until eventually they dug their way through that wall. Every day they were trying, but every day they had no expectation today was going to be the day they would break through the wall. But they understood fully that the process wasn't about the outcome; it was about what they were trying to do every day, which was intensely try to dig a hole through the wall. And so, if you really try to touch your forehead to your toes in Paschimottanasana, if you really look at what you're doing and try to do it, see, is that what I'm doing, or am I just going to go? Ugh. Because this is me trying to not move. by bracing my body. And that's what a lot of people do in that posture. Whilst they think they're pulling hard, but they're pulling everything everywhere simultaneously, which is a zero-sum game. So that you know, but again, it comes back to practice. And I think 60-day challenges and other situations like that, doing back-to-back doubles, are all tools that can be used to break down the barriers, so that you might have those moments where you kind of go, oh my God, look at what just happened. I suddenly broke through some layer that I had previously thought was just impenetrable.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's powerful.
Humbling. Very humbling, but cool.
Yeah.
All right, we've got 3 minutes left. So anything you want to bring up? Rapid fire express questions, or we'll have Michelle sum up.
Oh dear. Well, I was looking at Laura and Steffi because I've had conversations with you guys. Is there anything, comment you want to make, Laura, you too, Steffi, on your journey here and what you yeah.
Where's Laura driving?
Somewhere with green trees,
yes,
and green fields.
And grass.
Nice.
Green. It's like England.
On this drive, I've been driving so long that I was actually able to listen to Sarah's class remotely.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
You have been driving, but that's great.
I'm driving from Indianapolis to New York. So all I want to say is how sincerely grateful I am for the integrity that you have to the Bikram Yoga practice, and for Michelle's support. I'm starting up a Bikram Yoga club in Indianapolis for 4 years after living 20 years in Boulder, Colorado. I haven't had that kind of community, and so slowly I'm connecting with people who want to develop their practice, and I'm just so grateful that I can tap into your teaching as a resource for myself and for others, so thank you.
Nice. Wonderful. Good luck.
Steph, yeah, I think you feel the same. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I know.
I am not far from Boulder. I'm in Fort Collins, and yeah, there's a transition in my community, and I'm seeking more from my journey at this moment, and it's wonderful to be part of this.
Wonderful,
Thank you
Steffi.
very much.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
I think
actually
that's a
practiced
good way
Bikram
to.
yoga Fort Collins a long time ago, way back when. Probably like
Okay.
2 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think that's a good way to end it is, Bikram Yoga San Jose. I mean, I think we pride ourselves as well, stay very humble in making sure, right, that we learn that, the right way, and we continue to, teach it the way that it was taught to us in the lineage from Bikram, because it works. It works. It's doing things for mankind, and so for you guys to be an example, and all of us right here together to come together and voice out loud, with questions and comments and perspectives on what this yoga is doing, just makes it live even that much sharper. So I appreciate that. I appreciate these, and I appreciate that you're all leaning on BYSJ, because I think we do a disservice when we shy away from what it really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
Till
you.
next time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Lovely
everybody.
Lovely to see you all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for hosting. Thank you, everybody. Yay.
Wonderful.